Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Entrepreneurial in this New World digital event hosted by CMI Scotland. I'm Ellen McCormack, and I'm the Networks Engagement Lead at CMI, and I'll shortly be handing over to Renee, who will be beginning today's session. This session is being recorded and it will be shared with those who book to attend, but the recording will also be available on the CMI website and CMI YouTube channel. If you have any questions during the webinar, please use the live chat box on the right of your screen, and we shall answer as many as we can during the Q&A. So now over to Renee Raper, Chair of CMI Scotland, to begin today's session.
Hi, thank you, Ellen, for the introduction, and welcome to everybody. Great to see so many from far and wide. I'm really excited about this evening's event. We've got a really packed agenda, and so I'll try and keep my introductions brief for you. So we've got three brilliant speakers, each experts in their own area, and they're going to share their experience, their thoughts, and their ideas with you. So first of all, we're going to hear from Bob Keiller CBE. Hi, Bob.
Hi, how are you doing, Renee?
I'm doing fine, thank you. So Bob is business advisor for AB15 and an entrepreneur who says he's inspiring others, which is great. He's chaired quite a lot of organisations, including the Aberdeen and Grampian Chamber of Commerce, Scottish Enterprise, Entrepreneurial Scotland and Oil and Gas UK. He's been a CEO of three global oil services companies, PSN, Wood, PSN and Wood Group. And he's even found time for then being in the Hall of Fame for Entrepreneurial Scotland. He's been Entrepreneur of the Year 2006 and 8. He's been Scottish Businessman of the Year 2007 and Scottish Male Business Leader for 2011. Phew, so hopefully we can hear all that Bob has to say. I'm looking forward to it. Our next speaker will be Chris Moule. And Chris is Head of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at Robert Gordon University in Aberdeen. So Chris joined RGE in 2010, and I have to say we worked together quite successfully, I think, Chris, for a number of years. In his current role, he is leading RGU's award-winning Entrepreneurship and Innovation Group, which is supporting and fostering entrepreneurship with students, graduates, staff, and the wider community as well. So he's got a wealth of entrepreneurial business. He started 3 businesses by himself, and he gives talks, he's at conferences, and he runs workshops for corporates, local authorities, and for the NHS. So lots to tell us there. Thanks, Chris. And finally, but not last but not least, definitely, Emily, please. So Emily, she, from graduating, she worked in the private sector, the public sector, and in third sector with marketing and business development, and then decided in 2017, hey, I want to get out there and be a self-employed entrepreneur. And that's what she did. and she set up McGowan Marketing, which is now one of the top marketing agencies in the south of Scotland. And if you're in Galashiels, you'll see one of her things on the side of a building. Brilliant. So like any true entrepreneur, Emily doesn't just stick with one thing. She's always around looking for opportunities and ideas. And also, like a few entrepreneurs, she's had her successes, and as she says, her maybe less successful adventures, which she calls them. So we've got a really broad-rounded view then that Emily can give us about what it's really like. So as I say, I'm really excited here. So we're going to start. We're going to have Bob's presentation, Chris's presentation, then Emily and join us for a question and a discussion. So please put all your comments, ideas, questions in the chat, and we'll be able to take as many as we can afterwards. So thank you, and let's start this evening's session with Bob, please.
Okay, thank you, Renee. So over the next 15 minutes or so, I really want to share 3 stories with you about innovation and entrepreneurship. The first story involves pipes. The third one is about pensioners, but the middle one involves potatoes. In fact, my first story involves a chance meeting between Vincent from Pulp Fiction and Alan from The Hangover, but we'll come to that in a minute. So Paul McMillan was working as a pipe fitter offshore in 1999. He was asked to trace this pipe that carried a dangerous substance so they could do some maintenance work on it. It sounds easy, but the pipe went up into the ceiling area and it came down through various floors and through various walls, and it was indistinguishable from all the pipes. He thought it would take 5 minutes. It took him 5 hours. And he thought to himself, there has to be a better way than this. Couldn't we send an electrical signal along the pipe? But then he thought, electricity, dangerous environment, sparks, maybe not. But it was, and it still is, a serious problem. This is a short video clip from earlier on this year.
A maintenance worker here at the Friendly Garden Apartments had cut a gas pipe, which led to a leak, which then led to that explosion and fire. Well, today, moments ago, we learned that that indeed was the case. And according to investigators, that maintenance worker was in building 2405, which used to be what you're looking at now, working in unit 101, trying to fix a clogged drain. He went into a utility basement area underneath the apartment, and that's when investigators say he mistook the gas pipe for a drain water pipe.
Yeah, it was interesting. He was in room 101. Over the next few years, Paul struggled with the various options he thought about: lasers, infrared, ultrasound. None of them worked. Eventually, he refined his idea. He thought he had a potential answer. He says, why not use a small vibrating clamp, put it on the pipe, and detect the vibrations at the far end using a frequency monitor? Let me show you the problem and what Paul's solution was. So imagine we've got a pipe like this, okay, across the screen. Should be dead easy to trace one end from the other, but imagine this pipe goes through some walls. And then imagine there are more than one pipe. So to trace one from the other, imagine that you put a small pulsar unit at the pipe you're trying to trace, and then you try and detect it at the far end by using a detector. And in this example, we put the detector on the first pipe and nothing happens. We put the detector on the second pipe, and what do you know? Nothing happens. And of course, we put it on the third pipe, and hopefully it picks up the vibration, lights the light, and shows you you're on the right pipe. You know, the good thing about it was that Paul worked in a company that had an innovation department. Yay! He sent them an email about his idea. He got no response. He sent a second message. They came back to him and said, look, we'll set up a meeting. We'll get to chat to you about your idea, but we're busy, so we'll come back to you. It never happened. He contacted them a third time and he got no response again. So Paul felt that his idea might never see the light of day. But in 2018, Paul went to a fancy dress party at a neighbour's house on New Year's Day. He went dressed as Vincent from Pulp Fiction, and that's where he met Bruce, who was dressed as Alan from The Hangover. This is them at the party. They got on well. And in 2019, Paul had moved onshore and found himself sitting at a desk just across from Bruce. A happy coincidence. Now, Bruce is a safety expert and was really concerned about 2 recent incidents when people had cut into the wrong pipe. Now, thankfully, nobody had been hurt, but it was just a matter of luck. He came back to his desk. He told Paul what happened. Paul shared his idea about the pulse-based pipe detector. Bruce was fascinated. They talked about it at length and how it would work. And over the next few weeks, they went and bought components on Amazon. They tested the principle on water pipes in Bruce's house, and it all seemed to work. So a few months later, they decided to apply for an entrepreneur support program in Aberdeen. They had to do a pitch to a panel to get on the program. Now, they got on the program. Bruce and Paul developed their idea. They lodged a patent application. They produced a working prototype. And in November 2021, they had a field trial up at Sullom Voe oil terminal in the Shetlands. Now, the operating company set them a tricky test. They asked one of their most experienced technicians to trace a long pipe over several hundred meters and confirm that he correctly located the other end. Took him about 15 minutes. Then they radioed Bruce, who was with the guy, to switch on the detector, and Paul started the pulse unit. A few or 5 seconds later, Bruce came back and said, "Yep, we've detected the pipe, but it's not the one the technicians identified. The technician had made a mistake." They've now raised funds to develop the detector, and I act as their unpaid critical friend and mentor. However, if Bruce and Paul had not met, albeit in fancy dress, if they hadn't happened to end up working next to each other, and if there had been no entrepreneur support program, then maybe Paul's idea might never have been developed. Which begs the question, how many great ideas are never developed? The ideas that you need to transform your business may already be in your business, but how do you flush out the ideas and take the best ones forward? Which takes me to my second story. In 2012, my friend Steve McCreary was a senior manager at Aberlour Children's Trust, one of Scotland's biggest charities. He was frustrated that frontline staff never seemed to come up with any improvement proposals, and it wasn't because they didn't care. They were passionate about what they did, helping some of the most disadvantaged people in our society. So he started asking why. He asked the frontline staff themselves, he asked supervisors, managers. No one really knew. Managers felt that the same as Steve, frustrated at the lack of improvement ideas from staff, but staff were suspicious that management wouldn't listen to the ideas anyway, so what would be the point? Steve set out to change this. He spoke to the CEO, who agreed with Steve that a potential improvement opportunity was being missed here. He started a campaign to get staff to submit their ideas on how to improve the organisation. He got lots of suggestions, hundreds of ideas. Oh, he was euphoric. It's great. He took the ideas to the management team. They sounded excited. They said they welcomed each and every suggestion and looked forward to taking some of them forward if they could, when it was appropriate, within existing business plans, of course. Steve was still delighted. A few weeks passed. He waited for smoke to appear at the Sistine Chapel chimney. It never came. He went back to talk to the managers. They'd each been allocated a pile of ideas and they'd sifted through all of them. To be honest, Steve, most of these ideas are a bit pie in the sky. You know, they would cost a fortune to implement. Benefits are not really clear. Money's tight. We're all flat out busy at the moment. I'm not sure we'll be able to do much with them. Steve was deflated. Frontline staff were stopping him to ask about their suggestions. Steve was a bit embarrassed about this. What had gone wrong? He sat and thought it through. Why were staff unable to come up with practical, workable improvement suggestions? Why were none of the ideas practicable or affordable? Why weren't the managers able to see the potential in the ideas and potentially develop them? The organisation was short-staffed, it was underfunded, perhaps it was never going to work. I met him for a beer, and he was reflecting on this, what he thought was a failed experiment, and I said, "What did you do to get the NPKs right?" And he went, "What?" He didn't understand the question. I explained to him that it was a term from farming, being from the borders, you know. Before you plant a seed or a seed potato, you really need to make sure the soil has the right balance of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And if you don't, then the seeds might not grow at all. He looked at me as if I had two heads. He says, "What do you mean, Bob?" I said, "What had you done to make sure that the improvement proposals were practical and affordable and that the benefits were clear?" I asked him what had he done to make sure that there was at least some funds available to implement at least one or two of the ideas. And I asked him what he'd done to check that the culture was ready for these staff suggestions. And you could see a wry smile spread across his face. Stupid, stupid, stupid. I didn't do any of these things. No wonder it didn't work. What an idiot. But of course, he wasn't an idiot. He simply hadn't realized the power that the organizational immune systems have to kill off even the best ideas and suggestions. Despite the CEO being an enthusiast, the layer below was a bit like permafrost. The ideas simply couldn't get through it. So Steve went back to the drawing board. He thought it through from first principles. He did his homework. He created a plan. His plan included training staff in how to develop and write simple business improvement proposals. He set up a competition with a small budget carved out for the best proposals. He defined clear criteria. He trained up a team of judges who were drawn from the frontline staff. He allocated senior managers to mentor those ideas that were shortlisted, and he communicated what was going on all the time. He began to thaw the permafrost. Staff whose proposals had been shortlisted were given training on how to pitch their ideas. Many for the first time they'd done anything like that. They held a final where the staff were in front of an audience of their colleagues. They pitched their proposals to the judges. The judges backed some of the ideas and allocated some funding to them. But the whole process was transformational. The culture at Aberlour was turned on its head. Staff felt respected, listened to, and empowered. Managers were proud of their teams, and people vowed to enter next year's competition. Steve had successfully vaccinated the organisation to stop it rejecting changes. So why am I telling you this? Well, it may be that your organisation doesn't have the right soil conditions to grow new ideas, which brings me to my third story. Now, I work with early stage entrepreneurs all the time. They're all passionate and committed, and they're convinced that their product or service can be successful. I have no idea whether the products are any good. That's for future customers to decide. But whatever the product, if an entrepreneur can't convince anyone about its value, then the venture is unlikely to succeed. Training people how to present is a good start, but it's not enough. Teaching people how to design their pitch to answer the audience's questions. Teaching people how to deliver a pitch that's fascinating, persuasive, and teaching people how to handle questions in a way that's respectful, humble, and honest. These are vital. So let me tell you about Andrew Puffery. Andrew's the CEO of a company called CareSourcer, which compares the feature of care homes online. He was struggling to get his target customer, Edinburgh City Council, to see the value of his idea. He'd already had 12 meetings with them, and each time they wanted to know more detail about his software, and he suspected they were trying to copy what he was doing for themselves. In January 2018, Andrew came to Aberdeen for a one-day training course, and that's when, I guess, the penny dropped for him. He was describing his software as an online catalogue, but actually prices and availability were being updated all the time. It wasn't an online catalogue, it was booking.com for care homes. We also helped him to articulate how it would work as a key tool in dealing with bed blocking in Edinburgh's hospitals. We encouraged him to find a personal story to carry his message about why he was doing this. And in February that year, he sent me this message. Let's pick up the email here. He said, "Bob, it's still confidential, but I went to meet Edinburgh's Council Chief Social Worker. Bear in mind, this was our 13th meeting over 18 months to try and get a pilot with little progress. He said, I did two things differently. One, no slides. I just told a story about a care seeker we'd helped. And two, I sketched where the problem is and how our service helps for 15 minutes on a 12-foot by 3-foot whiteboard in the room. The outcome was that we got a 6-month pilot with NHS Lothian and Edinburgh Council starting this Monday." So, he'd stopped trying to sell software because software is expensive. The client's got no budget. They couldn't justify it to their managers. Instead, he created a story in their heads. Andrew's product, CareSourcer, was the way to solve a huge problem about bed blocking they'd been struggling with for years, and it worked. So the approach that we showed Andrew allowed him to raise a further £8.3 million to fund his company. A key skill for entrepreneurship to succeed is persuasion. Understanding the psychology, the barriers, all the things that we need to convince an audience of. These are fundamental. And the same goes for anyone trying to make changes in an existing organisation. If you want to make changes that matter, you need to have a proposal that makes sense and can be backed up by evidence. But that's not enough, because you need to take people with you. You need to convince them logically and persuade them emotionally that your idea makes sense and it's worth trying. The story you create in other people's heads is what makes the difference. So that's why we call this whole area business storytelling. So what do I take from these three stories? Entrepreneurship isn't always about raising millions of pounds from investors and creating new companies. Sometimes it's about identifying the seeds of ideas, that are already in your organisation and creating the right conditions to let them flourish and to grow. And whether you're an early stage entrepreneur or part of a long-standing company, if you want to create meaningful change, you need to be good at persuasion. At least I hope I've persuaded you of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Bob. That was great. Thank you. So I'll need to go and check my soil, certainly. And thank you very much. So we'll see you back when we do when we have our Q&A discussion. So if we can move over now and invite Chris, please, to the floor.
Evening, Renee.
Hello. When you're ready, Chris.
Okay, let me share my screen. Hopefully you can see that. Can you see that, Renee? Would somebody like to?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Excellent. So good evening, everyone. I'm delighted to be invited to speak to you this evening. But I want you to indulge me, first of all. I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to imagine a typical entrepreneur. Close your eyes. And when you hear entrepreneurship or an entrepreneur, who do you think of? Now, I'm guessing a number of you will be thinking of possibly Elon Musk, Richard Branson, Anita Roddick, for those of you of a certain age who remember Anita, James Dyson, possibly Arianna Huffington as well. I bet you don't think about this young man. So this is Richard Terreur. And I'm going to tell you a story about Richard, because he's an entrepreneur. He brought a viable solution to an existing problem. So this was back in 2012. Richard and his family were living on the edge of a vast national park in Kenya. And they were raising livestock. And one of the biggest challenges that Richard and his family faced was protecting his animals from predators, particularly lions, and particularly at night time. And so that was the job that they were trying to do. They wanted to protect their livestock from these lions. And so Richard, being a young entrepreneurial mindset, started to put up lamps, and he put up a scarecrow to try and deter the lions from attacking his livestock. But they didn't really work. But one evening, Richard was walking across the field towards the barn, and he had a torch, and he realized that it was the movement of the light that was actually keeping the lions away. And Richard was always interested in electronics. He used to take radios apart when he was a young boy. And so he created this system of lights using solar panels and car batteries and things that he could get hold of, motorcycle indicator lights. And he set up this system that would turn off the lights on and off in sequence to create that sense of movement that he hoped would scare the lions away. He rigged this up along his perimeter fence, and it worked. Now, these lights became known as Richard's Lions lights, and soon other villagers around Kenya were hearing about it and creating their own version of the Richard Lion lights. They were installing them, and it seemed to work. It was saving the livestock from the predators. And this is a compelling and inspiring story. And Chris Anderson, who started the TED Talks, heard about this story, and he wanted Richard to share it with the world. But Richard was a shy young boy. He struggled with English. He often spoke in incoherent sentences. But with a bit of training, a bit of practice, a bit of mentoring, he managed to frame his story. He found the right place to begin and develop the logical arts or events and build his confidence to be able to share his personality and let his personality shine through. And in 2013, he spoke at Long Beach, USA, and he had the audience in the palm of his hands. If you have an opportunity, go and watch it. It's only a 5-minute TED Talk, but it's inspiring. And he had the audience on their seat, on the edge of their seats. Now, this is important because what Richard came up with was desirable. People wanted it. It was feasible. He could make it with those parts, and it was viable. It was, commercially viable. It didn't cost that amount of money. He then developed a really good pitch presentation, and pitching is coachable. He had the mentoring, and with practice, he transformed that muddled content into coherent, memorable mesmerizing. And we can all do that. We all have that entrepreneurial mindset. Where do these ideas come from? Where do these entrepreneurial ideas come from? There's a whole number of ways. I'm not going to go through them all, but maybe it's curious, maybe it's accidental. I have post-it notes here. 1968, Spencer Silver was a scientist in 3M headquarters in Maplewood, and he was working on creating a strong adhesive, but accidentally developed a new material that was light enough to easily remove and peel apart. So that was a kind of accidental. If you think about new business models, think about Airbnb. You have to have a passion for these entrepreneurial ideas. Those of you that would have seen Dragon's Den will know about Peter Jones, one of the dragons. He was passionate about tennis, and that went on to create his own tennis academy. And that was his entrepreneurial passion that he had. And so there's a number of ways in which entrepreneurial ideas can raise themselves. And these are just some jump off points for all of them. It's really important to be inspired. Inspiration is important to entrepreneurship. Rudyard Kipling quotes, "When your demon is in charge, do not try to think consciously, drift, wait, and obey." And we live in a culture that's often obsessed with measuring talent and ability, and we often overlook the important role of inspiration. Bob just gave a very inspirational talk there, and it awakens us to new possibilities by allowing us to transcend those ordinary experiences and limitations. And I wanted to share with you some areas that inspire me. And I call these jump off points. So Springwise, I don't know if any of you go onto Springwise. It's a leading global innovations intelligence platform for positive and sustainable change. They email it every week with amazing sort of innovative thinking and ideas from across the planet. It's a library, a curated library of over 11,000 global innovations. TED, which I spoke about previously, that's devoted to sharing ideas. Started in 1984 as a conference, and TED stands for Technology, Entertainment and Design. It covers a whole number of issues and has some amazing speakers to share ideas and communities across the world. I don't know if any of you have seen Faith Popcorn's Trend Bank. Again, it's a great repository of insight and data around cultural shifts. Trend analysis and future strategists and trend spotters share these 17 trends that reflect both different and unobvious dimensions of consumer behavior and desire. For instance, one of them is cocooning, which expresses the craving for safety and an increasing uncertain world. Future Everything's another one that's been going since 1995. It's a multidisciplinary digital culture of communities. They have international community of artists, technologists, and industrial collaborators that explore those intersections of art, technology, and society through bold new commissions and living laboratories and participatory design. They also have public events as well. And then, I don't know, I've had the opportunity to go to MIT Media Lab, but go on their website. It's one of the most inspirational leading research and academic organizations in the world. And again, they promote that interdisciplinary research culture that brings real diverse interest and inquiry. Let me move on. Another way to get inspired, of course, is by reading. And I believe that entrepreneurs, do read a lot, and I always admire those people that can read and learn from the struggles that other people went through and provide opportunities that arose to them. I think the average American reads about one book a year. The average CEO reads around 5 in a month. So that's about 60 books a year. And scientifically, reading has been proven to aid those development of those entrepreneurial skills, such as strategic decision-making, verbal intelligence, and it helps to train the muscles. It's like a muscle workout when you read. And here's a few books. Wired magazine, True is a great way of getting sucked into those innovation thinking. Elon Musk says he spends 10 hours a day reading science fiction and philosophy and religion. And these are a few books that have certainly inspired me along the way. And that's a good way of being inspired. In terms of practical support, certainly in Scotland, there's a whole ecosystem of practical support. And it's interesting when René was introducing Bob, because he's been chair of a number of these organisations. But Scottish Enterprise is Scotland's national economic development agency that are committed to growing Scotland's economy. And they provide business development advice. They have a number of funding and grants. They provide advice on exports and international markets, and they look to improve productivity and employee engagement. And they run the Business Gateway, contracts, which is a really a gateway for those that are entrepreneurs, that want to start up businesses and that want to access the support and advice when forming companies around things like intellectual property or finance. Elevator is an organisation in Scotland. It's a private sector organisation dedicated to supporting entrepreneurs, inventors and disruptors. And they have bases in Aberdeen and Dundee, Angus and across Lanarkshire. And they deliver some of the gateway services. Entrepreneurial Scotland, which I know Bob has been very close to, they are a charity and they think, act and lead entrepreneurship in Scotland. And they blend that experience and teaching and peer-to-peer learning. And they have, bring in a community of around about 5,000 leaders to support entrepreneurs in Scotland. The Chamber, most of you will have come across the Chamber of Commerce, that member organisation. They provide very strong advocacy for entrepreneurs across Scotland, but they also run training and events and provide news items. And then Global Scots, this is a network, I think it's been going for about 20 years now. And it's very relevant in today's market because it's a network that's offering a place for entrepreneurs and professionals to connect with very valuable connections across the world. So those individuals that are Scottish, that have a passion for Scotland, that grew up in Scotland, have a very strong connection back to Scotland and want to support, encourage and develop and nurture that business community through events, through mentorship, through conversations to accelerate Scotland's growth in primarily international markets as well. In terms of incubators and accelerators and competitions, again, Scotland is abundant of these across the region, both nationally and regionally. So we have Scottish Edge, which is a competition aimed at identifying and supporting Scotland's up-and-coming, innovative, high-growth entrepreneurial talent. And Edge 19, this is the 19th Edge, which is coming, the award ceremony, I think, is on the 9th of June. But they have prize funding of £150,000 to support entrepreneurs. And it's competitive and it's pan-Scotland, which has been excellently, really well received. Sorry, I'll just go back to that. I want to talk about Converge. Converge is an interesting one because that's entrepreneurial development program, which is open to staff and students and recent graduates of Scottish universities like Robert Gordon University and Research Institute. And that, again, they have a number of competitions and mentoring and training around the Converge Challenge, around net zero, for the creative industries, and kickstart those very early stage opportunities that are coming up. And then at RGU, we run our own very successful startup accelerator. We have run 4 accelerators, originally focusing on our students and graduates and staff. But more recently, we've been looking to have a regional accelerator that's focusing on the Aberdeenshire region, again, to foster and stimulate entrepreneurship. We provide seed funding, we provide mentoring and incubation as well. And then we have other partners in terms of TechX, which is run by the Net Zero Technology Centre, and Codebase, which again have incubators looking to build communities and culture and education that specifically promotes the tech innovation startups and scale-ups across the region. A little bit about financial support now. So you may have heard of the 4 F's of startup financial support. These are the investors, the early stage investors that might lend you some money or gift you money. So the founders, the entrepreneurs themselves, their family, their friends, and of course their folks. So there might be someone in your family that might be interested in purchasing a share or having some ownership in your business venture. And it's a very basic form of funding. And generally, these individuals that you get the money from aren't sophisticated investors. They usually kind of invest in a whimsical manner, but they need strong advice if they're investing or they're loaning you some money. So even if they are loaning money to you as a friend or a family, you still need a well-drafted investment agreement and a term sheet, because generally families and friends who are financing businesses don't usually involve themselves in formal reviews or due diligence involved in loans or angel investments. They're not going to conduct a thorough review of your credit history, for example, and they're usually relationship based, and that can lead to some problems. And then there's other financial support in terms of angel networks, particularly for those early stage companies. Angel networks are usually individuals or groups of individuals that are investing in high growth companies. They're usually, but not always, high net worth individuals. And again, it's kind of more personal. And around 44% of the companies that have received angel network investment for the last 10 years have usually been technology or IP based. And these are some of them. So Mint Ventures is a new one in Scotland, which is primarily looking at female entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs that have a slant on female products and services. Link Scotland is an angel capital association that's very active. And then there are other ones like Archangels and Gabriel, who are very active in Scotland in terms of angel investment. And it's growing. It's been quite an immature industry, but it's growing in Scotland, which is great to see. Innovate UK, Scotland's UK innovation agency, they help businesses to develop and commercialise products and processes and services. And they have a number of funds. So they have an Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, they have a Global Challenge Research Fund and Strategic Priorities Fund of 1.5 billion, 830 million. So large numbers, but they're very competitive. And all these challenges are competitive, but they are tackling big societal challenges. And often they're looking for consortiums of universities and companies to go in and bid for those money. And then in Scotland, we have an organisation called Interface, which is really to enable business and academic collaborations for economic and societal benefit. They look to stimulate relationships between businesses and third sector communities and universities to support innovation. And finally, I just want to talk about crowdfunding. This is kind of a very attractive model, and many platforms have emerged recently as a way to raise capital for early start businesses. But you do need some advice, and you probably need to speak to people that have gone through the crowdfunding process, because it's not that simple. There's two types of crowdfunding. There's reward-based crowdfunding, where investors typically invest a small amount of money in returns for discounts or exclusive merchandise. And that's quite useful for e-commerce businesses to finance the design of products or the sourcing and manufacturing costs. And funding is non-dilutive. So you don't want selling equity in return for capital, whereas equity-based crowdfunding, unlike reward-based crowdfunding, is equity-based. And you're selling shares in the company to investors in return for investment. So, you might raise £100,000 from 200 different investors, each investing £500. It's less competitive than reward-based, but again, it has a number of pros and cons, and you have to go through a screening process. And the more I speak to people that are doing crowdfunding, you kind of need to have raised money prior to going on crowdfunding, because you need to have raised probably up to 50% of the money that you're looking to raise prior to going on, and you really need to do lots of promotion again before launching onto a crowdfunding platform. But there's a lot of advice available, and these are some of the ones that are currently out there. Quickly, very top 5 tips for entrepreneurship. Do what you love. It's so important that you're passionate about what you do. Entrepreneurship is hard. It's hard to do. According to serial entrepreneur Naval Ravikant, he believes that product market fit should actually be founder product market fit, because you have the means to run a business. Lots of people have means to run a business that are better than you. So you need to start a business that matches your skills, your experience, your personality, your passion. You need to solve real problems. You need to obsess over what the customer needs. The biggest source of conflict in business comes from unmet needs. And if a customer doesn't get a service or product that they're expecting, then their needs won't be met and they'll just feel frustrated. So you need to be obsessive about that. You need to find a good mentor. Mentors are very important. We have a good mentor system in Scotland. And you kind of just need to do it. The last business tip for entrepreneurs comes from Nike. Just do it. And I don't mean just starting it. I mean, getting out of your head. Stop overthinking it. Stop questioning it, whether you're making the right call. Just go and do it. I remember I spoke to my wife about my first business for 2 years. And she turned to me one day and she said, "Chris, go and do it or shut up." And so I went and did it, and I never looked back. So just do it. My top 5 tips. and that's me. This is a little bit about who I am and what I do. Follow us on Instagram at RGU Innovation. Follow us on Twitter. If you want to email us, innovation@rgu.ac.uk. I lead a team that is here to inspire and foster entrepreneurship amongst all our communities. And it's been a pleasure speaking to you this evening. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Right, that was loads of information for us to actually take in about very practical things of what can help us find, as you said, the jump-off points, and looking at where we can get help and funding. So thanks very much, Chris. So I'd now like to bring Bob and Emily in so that we can start on looking at some of the questions that you've been submitting tonight and previously. So we'll just jump straight in then, looking at the time here. Emily, I think for the first question for you, please, is a question from Victoria saying, how unique does my idea have to be, or is it equally my determination and self-belief that are important in becoming an entrepreneur?
A great question, Victoria, and fantastic presentations from Chris and Bob. Chris, I actually have just opened my eyes because when I had them closed down, I was looking at my entrepreneur. It was Bob after that impressive CV that we had at the beginning. So, it's a really good question. So before I answer, I'm just going to kind of ask a question back, which is, what does unique mean? You know, I think it's a term that's bandied about a lot, but for me, it's very subjective. I mean, I'm in marketing, and central theme to marketing is a unique selling proposition. But sometimes I think that it can actually stifle entrepreneurialism because people will not progress because they don't think that what they have is unique. So, a bit of a kind of question around that one. And also ideas. I don't know what Bob and Chrissy's thoughts are on this, but sometimes I think that ideas are actually the easy part. Because we're all imaginative creatures, we can all see where things could be better because ultimately we're all consumers as well. So ideas are not actually the hard part. So I think determination and self-belief are hugely important. I love what Chris said about passion. I actually wrote it down. Because I think that it's something that's missed quite a lot when we talk in very objective terms around entrepreneurialism. It sounds very serious and stuffy, which clearly, isn't me. And I think that's where the energy and enthusiasm and drive will come. And I just linking it back as well to something that, I always kind of reflect on, which is linked to ideas and uniqueness, is I think that people are very focused on being disruptive. There's a real sort of on trend about, to be an entrepreneur, you've got to be disruptive in some sort of sector, which more often than not links to tech, which again is not everybody, or you want to be differentiated. But I think that there's a point that's being missed, which is about being distinct. And I think as an entrepreneur, if you can say to yourself, you're distinct, then there's real mileage there in taking whatever your idea is to market and building it and building a fantastic brand. And I always refer to baked beans when I tell people this story, because if you look at baked beans on a plate, irrespective of which tin they come from, they satisfy the same need, they solve the same problem. You're hungry and then you're not. But actually, if you think about Heinz baked beans, they're very distinct. I mean, they would argue that there's a difference in the flavour or whatever, but whether people can actually differentiate when they're on the plate, I don't know. And it's that distinctness that's helped Heinz build that brand and take that kind of concept to where it is today. So it was a very long-winded answer, but I hope it's clear.
Oh, thanks, Emily. I mean, I think there's a couple of things that I'd like to ask the guys actually that you picked up there about saying the ideas are the easy bit. Really, yeah. And this idea about distinctiveness. But Bob, what do you think about Emily?
I like the way Emily's described that. I like it. I'd written down. I mean, the disruptive label is kind of a little bit hackneyed, a little bit overused at times. You know, a few years ago it was game changer. Everybody was a game changer. Before that, it was a paradigm shifting. You know, it's the same kind of things. People like to label themselves in these ways, but in reality, I would agree with you, Emily. It's about being distinctive, but in a good way. So being slightly more attractive to potential customers, but it doesn't have to be completely different. And often that can be delivered by not just the service you're providing or the product you're providing, but something about the way you provide it. Can I share a quick example of you? Now, Rennie, Emily, and I have got a connection through the borders here. But when I was, in fact, it was before I was a teenager, when I was 12 years old, what I used to do for a business on a Saturday night was I would stand outside the local town hall in Jedburgh, and people used to get a stamp on the back of their hand to prove that they'd paid. And I was quite good at drawing, so I used to sell forgeries. And I used to try and sell forgeries, but I was finding that people didn't want the risk of getting caught out. So it was £1 to get into the dance. I would sell them a forgery for 50 pence. And business was slow. And I thought, it's the way I'm delivering this service. I'm not differentiating myself adequately enough. So what I gave them was, I said, I'm going to change this. I'm going to give you a money back guarantee. If you don't get in, I'll give you your money back. And that transformed the business because they could see my level of commitment. And that made the business much more viable. It lacked a few other things like scalability and various other things, and honesty and legality and things like that. But it was a good way of supplementing my income when I was 12 years old. It was all about doing things a little bit differently.
Okay, Bob, so you just did it then to get yourself started.
I love that. And actually, something else that I wrote down was ask for forgiveness rather than permission. You know, I'm a real believer in, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you sometimes just have to push forward and go for it and try and see and adapt. So, yeah.
There's a great saying, Emily. What is it? Ready, fire, aim. I think.
Ready, fire, aim.
Instead of ready, aim, fire. Ready, fire, aim. You know, get going. And then you can,
absolutely. Yeah.
I quite like that. I was just gonna pick up on something that you said about kind of ideas, I guess. And those of you that haven't, a big plug here, go and watch my TED Talk. TEDx talk.
This is unfair. I'm the only one who hasn't given a TED Talk.
I haven't, Emily. You're okay.
About recombinant innovation, because in that I talk about there's not a lot of new things. You know, it's very rare that someone's sitting in their back shed and that someone's jumping out of the bath with these eureka moments. Things, you know, very. And you know, and I talk about recombinant innovation. About a lot of innovation is coming around about the combining of ideas. Mm-hmm. So you know, the wheel's been around for millions of years. Suitcases have been around for hundreds of years. Somebody decided to put a wheel on a suitcase, and you suddenly have wheeled luggage. So I talk a lot about that, and so I think that you know, you doesn't necessarily need to you know, have lots of ideas to be entrepreneurial or innovative. You know, there's things that you can lean upon that are already out there.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Good, Bob, you're back again. We lost you for a minute there.
Sorry, yeah.
It's okay. So we've got a question in from Chris here. Say, do you have any advice for entrepreneurs who currently work full-time and feel they struggle from a time perspective to pursue ideas?
Yeah. So who are you directing that at, Rennie?
Well, whoever would like to pick it up. Are you offering, Bob?
Yeah, I can do. I guess it comes back to the answer to the Spice Girls questions. What do you really, really want? Because if you're determined to become a full-time business owner of a vibrant entrepreneurial enterprise, it's about when, you know, not if. And then managing your time wisely is important, because I see a lot of early stage entrepreneurs end up spending their time, as Chris was warning against, trying to perfect something that actually will probably end up being changed dramatically on the first contact with a customer, and yet they want to finesse it and finagle it until it's perfect. Another thing, they spend time on stuff that I'm thinking, that can't be critical to your mission at the moment. I met one entrepreneurial team who'd already hired a PR company to work with them, and I'm saying, but you don't have a product. You know, once you've got a product, I'm all for PR and marketing and all the kind of stuff that comes with it. But you're spending time and energy on that now. Surely you should spend time on actually getting something ready to go and test it with customers. So I guess it's these kind of things. And then it comes down to Chris's point there, you know, how do you survive when you're no longer in a full-time job? You know, you've got the different sources of potential funding, which can include all the ones that Chris talked about there. But realistically, you know, you need to work out what you need rather than what you want, so that you can work out exactly at what point you can step off and say, I'm committing now. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it full time.
Can I come in as well, Renee? Do we have time?
Yeah.
So when I was 16, I was at 6 o'clock on a Sunday morning when all my friends were coming back in from the clubs. I was loading up my boyfriend's van or car because we were doing weekly markets. So entrepreneurialism was always there. Still to venture into a nightclub, might add. But for some reason, you get sucked into like what is seen as the safe space, which is, you know, employment, and that is exactly what I did. And I was kind of trying to balance that, you know, how long can I stay? What can I do? How do I split my time? And then literally one day, 2017, like you said, I put my coat on and I walked out, and then I was like, right, that's it. I'm going to start on my own. And sometimes I think we talk about risk taking as entrepreneurs. And I always think to myself, the biggest single risk I took was actually compromising that nice, safe salary, and knowing that I was going to have to generate that income on my own. And it almost feels like every other risk now is kind of almost paler in significance to that, because that was my how to look after myself and my family money, you know. So I totally agree. I think there will come a point in time where you've just got to say, right, no, I'm gonna have to make the shift. And what's the worst thing that can happen? Like really nothing. You go back and get a job again.
Yeah.
Which obviously never do.
I guess, Renee, I had a similar moment like that. I'm flying across the Atlantic to go to the chief financial officer of the Halliburton Corporation to try and offer to buy a chunk of his business. Didn't have any money, didn't know where I would get it. And I also thought there's a fair chance I'll get fired. So the plan had two elements to it. One, get a return ticket so that you can get home at the company's expense. And two, 9 hours flight on the way back is a long enough time to actually put the story together to convince my wife it's time for a career change. I need to go and do something different.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that, Bob. I'll remember to get a return ticket then, wherever I'm going. So,
yeah.
Chris, we've had a question come through about sort of challenges for graduates. So it's a question from Fraser, saying, broadly speaking, do you think there are any additional entrepreneurship challenges for graduates versus someone who's already in a business?
Oh, good question, Fraser. So, I mean, I think, you know, the graduates that we're working with at the moment, they're ready to take on the world. You know, they're coming out of university and they're ready to take on the world. They are energetic. They are unencumbered by mortgages and kids. And in Scotland, because, you know, they don't have an awful lot of debt because the degrees are paid for in Scotland. And there's a new kind of a new world of work. You know, there's the gig economy, there's the side hustle, there's the digital nomad. So I know a recent graduate who has gone to Barcelona, you know, and started his business from there because he just needs a laptop and he can just go to Lisbon and then he's off to Cork and he's just going around the world. And so I think, you know, they're very passionate about the environment. You know, they see what's going wrong with the world and they want to make a difference. And they want to solve problems. So I think the challenges are they're certainly different to the ones that I went into when I graduated. So that's changed an awful lot, the world of work. Are there additional challenges? I mean, sometimes, you know, you still have to pay your dues. You still have to do the customer discovery. You know, it's difficult to get finance. There's some seed funding that you can get from some of the competitions. But, you know, sometimes they think that everything's going to come on a plate. Now, we've been working with graduates for 2 years that haven't sold a thing, you know, that, as Bob said, is working with the PR company, have been working on the logo for the last 12 months but actually haven't spoken to a customer. So you kind of, you still need to have something that's desirable. People want it, that's feasible. You have the resources to build it. That's viable, commercially viable. And sometimes maybe they don't want to do that piece of work, and that's important, because being an entrepreneur is hard work. You're trying to solve people's problems. So I kind of hope that's answered your question.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks very much, Chris, for that. I can hardly believe I can believe we're running out of time here, because I'm so busy listening to you all. I'm afraid we can't get through all the questions, so thank you for those. But I would like to before we go, just to have a quick, what would be your sort of top takeaways, top tips that you'd like to give our listeners here today? Who wants to start? Emily, is that?
I'll start. So I've got a couple. So don't get yourself into thinking, or that place of a false sense of security where you think progress is linear on an upward trajectory, because it's not, and that's okay. Because I think sometimes we like to make sure everything is in nice, neat boxes, and if we do everything X, Y, and Z in this formula way, then we're always going to be doing that. I just don't think that's realistic. And I think for me, an entrepreneur isn't just about risk-taking or innovation. It's actually about three things. So it is risk-taking and innovation, but it's also about that being proactive. And I think if you can identify those sort of traits or attributes within yourself, then you're already halfway there to being a wonderful entrepreneur.
Thank you. Thanks, Emily. Chris?
Yeah, thank you. I did put some on my slides, but I've got a quick three one. Make sure that you're customer-centric. Customer has to be at the center of everything that you do. You have to understand them. You need to have a real empathy, understand their pains, what keeps them awake at night. The other one is democratize entrepreneurship. It's so important. The entrepreneurs aren't just in the business school. They are the architects. They are the designers. They are the artists. They are there's so many across all of them. They're the technologists as well. And then finally, and I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't say this, work with universities. Universities are fantastic repositories of knowledge, of inspiration. And so, reach out to your university, because usually there'll be somebody like me that is passionate about entrepreneurship that would want to work with you.
Shameless plug.
Oh, wow. Where did you come from, Chris? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bob?
Yeah, I mean, for me, when you think about the main activities of entrepreneurs, they're generally persuading people to try and invest in them, give them money, support. They're investing people to come and join their team, and they're trying to persuade people to buy their products or services. So persuasion is such a big element of the journey, and yet people don't invest in their persuasion skills. And it's not necessarily something that's taught, even at great universities like Robert Gordon University. So I would say, if you've got a great product or service, that's great, but you need to think about how you get your message across, and putting effort into that is generally an area where you're going to get good returns.
Okay, thank you very much. So, well, unfortunately now we've run out of time, so it's been a very exhilarating, exciting evening. So I'd like to say thank you to Bob, Chris and Emily for sharing their ideas and thoughts. I'd like to say thanks to CMI, who've been doing everything that's fancy behind the scenes so we could come to you. And thank you for joining us this evening and putting your questions forward. So, I mean, I think we'll all have different takeaways. I think mine are, I've written down here, so create a story to persuade, have the right soil, and then just go and do it. So maybe the right soil and just do it isn't, have to get those in the right order, but hey, thank you very much again. So let's all go away, embrace entrepreneurship. I can't even say it now. Embrace entrepreneurship, yeah, and let's go and make a difference. So thank you, good night, and over to Ellen.
Thank you so much, Renee, and what a fabulous event. Thank you all for your incredible insights and expertise, and thanks to the audience for your comments and questions. Before we go, I just wanted to mention, if you're a member of CMI, you can log into Management Direct, which has a huge range of practical resources, and the link is in the chat. If you're not yet a member of the CMI, you can join the community by clicking the link in the chat. I hope you have a lovely evening, and thank you again for joining us. Good night.